Well, Keith, thanks for joining us and welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So just tell us, who is Keith? Tell us about yourself.
Oh, well, I used to be in computer programming, but not really running. I got involved in skiing when I was 15 or 16. And I ended up moving from England to Scotland and working in skiing, running my own ski school, tour operator business till about 2000. And during that time, I wanted to do some cross-country ski racing. So I decided to run to try to get fit. And I kept up the running, and I was pretty useless at the cross-country racing. And then when I moved to Australia, I continued with my running and was fortunate to join a really good coach and running group. 3 of them made it to the Olympics. And as far as running is concerned, watching them, I was trying to work out what they were doing and how they were doing it. And then a friend of mine who I'd been running with suddenly started overtaking me, which he'd never done before. And he had been for a biomechanic assessment. And I thought, well, I better do that. Oh. So I did that. And yeah, it did instigate a few changes, but the changes that he suggested, I wouldn't recommend now, although they made me start thinking. And that's where I started to change my technique in about 2007. And by about 2011, I was hitting personal bests in every single distance except marathon, which I didn't actually run. And when I did run a marathon, 5 years later, without sufficient training, I was only 2 minutes off my personal best of 2:41, which I did in 1984. So it was the technique that basically did it for me. And then, then my coach started asked me if I wanted to do some coaching, and he had clients that he couldn't manage. And so I started coaching, and then I really started learning a lot about technique and experimenting with clients, so working out what worked, what didn't. And then I met Heidi, my wife, who's the co-author of our book, and she didn't like being passed in training. And she came for a session with me. She'd been running, top runner, been running for years. Took her shoes off to get better feel. And after the session, she could hardly walk for 2 weeks because she was using different muscles. And her calf muscles were just so bad. She had trouble walking for 2 weeks. And yet she'd been running for 30, 40 years at a top level. So all these little things began to make us think. Meanwhile, my running clients were emailing me, asking me the same sort of questions all the time. So I was going back to emails and cutting and pasting and getting a bit fed up with repeating myself. So I decided that I needed to put all the information in one place. And that was the seed for the book. And meeting Heidi and marrying Heidi, who's a podiatrist and a top runner, we worked everything together. So that's really the history. And here I am now, collecting my UK pension and just concentrating on the book and the customers. For people who are not familiar with you, do you want to just give a ballpark age of where you're at? Well, for my age at the moment? I'm 67 next month.
Yeah, okay. I just think it's helpful for people to understand, how remarkably well and sustainable your strategies have proven to be.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important. So I just wanted to raise that. I'm interested, you mentioned, a couple of things. One is, what did they do with the biomechanical assessment? Was it machine?
It was about 3 hours worth of, they put little balls on my, little marker balls on my knees and my ankles and halfway up the leg and all that sort of thing. And did a very precise measurement of all my running action.
Yeah.
But we've since realized that that's basically irrelevant unless you're really absolutely looking to make fine detail changes to your running technique. We've actually come up with the common denominator in running that applies to everybody. And if you get that right, everything else is fixed. And if it's not completely fixed, that's the time to go for see a biomechanic for an assessment. I just got, what I got out of it was he could see weaknesses and he was trying to fix those weaknesses, but those weaknesses were caused by something else.
Yeah.
So he was really treating the symptoms, not the cause.
Yeah.
And what we believe we've done is we've treated the cause. If your technique is good, then basically when you finish your landing, your body is near vertically aligned. And so all your muscles are working for you and all your joints are in alignment. Whereas if you're running badly, as I was sticking my leg out in front with a big heel strike, or fairly big heel strike, because I was running 32 minutes for 10K then, or 33 about then.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And still with not great technique, but I was getting lots of injuries.
Yeah.
And the reason was I was basically walking forward, sticking my leg out in front of me. So when I landed, there was too much braking and my body wasn't in alignment. So when I finished my landing, I was actually sitting back a little bit. And so my knees were being stressed and my hip flexors were being stressed because I was sinking down every, 10 to 11,000 times an hour. It's,
yeah,
it's a lot of stress. So I was stressing the joints, and he was, and also when I landed, my non-supported hip was dropping. So he gave me hip hitching exercises to strengthen it. But that's always going to happen. If you stick your leg out in front of you and you land off balance, then your hip's going to drop. Strengthening it might help a little bit, but you're not attacking the real problem. And the real problem is that you're throwing your leg in front of you and causing it to break you. So you scrap that. You scrap that, then you fix all the other problems, and your body naturally strengthens. The other thing I remember he gave me, which did make a difference, he got me lifting my knees, which is really generally pointless, except that it stopped me throwing my legs so far forward. So that helped.
Okay.
And I did go a little bit faster because of that, but it was still very efficient. You really want to lift the whole body, not just part of it.
So we might come back to that, Keith, because I think that's a logical thing that people think they should do to run faster is to lift their knees more.
Yeah.
But I want to circle back to a couple of things you've said. And in the book, you talk about the fact that good technique is the same for everyone, that we're born with it.
Yes.
Can you talk about that more?
Yes. Well, you only really need to look at kids running at the beach if you're near a beach. They'll run on the concrete, they'll run on the sand, they'll move from one to the other, and they all look basically the same. There's very little difference. And so what we've realized is that rather than working with all the symptoms of poor technique, you make the technique good, and then everything else is fixed, more or less. And the common factor for everybody at every constant speed, whether you're fast or slow, you want to finish your landings. When you've finished your landing, when you're firmly on the ground, you're supported by your foot, you want to be as close to being vertical as possible. In other words, if you're leaning back, you're braking. Yep. So that's really the common factor for everybody. You want to be as close as you can to being vertically aligned. You're never going to make it exactly vertical. There's always some braking, which means you're always sitting back a bit. So basically, if you're tilted forwards, you're either falling over or you're accelerating. If you're leaning back when you've landed, you're either braking, or if you're stationary, you'd fall over. Yep. So that's basically it. So you want to be as close as possible to vertical as possible as you can be. And you notice people who are not, if you throw your leg forwards like a walking action, that foot isn't coming back during your running, doing that stride. Your foot is going to land in front of you, and then you're going to have to brake. You're going to have to sink and absorb that force. And then you're going to have to push again to replace the speed that you've just lost. Whereas a good runner will lose very little speed. And that's why they look smooth, because they're hardly braking each landing. So most of their speed comes from the speed they've already worked for.
So why do you think we lose the technique from childhood through to, you know, deciding to run in our 20s, 30s or 40s?
Yeah, I think there's two reasons. One is not necessarily in order. One, we stop running, and so we lose the specific muscles and the muscle memory to some degree. But I think what, and Heidi would say is a bigger factor, is wearing school shoes, shoes that are raised up at the back, because and are stiff, and you lose your muscles in your feet. But the main thing is it puts your body out of alignment. So you don't have what they call a neutral spine. A neutral spine is just sort of a nice curve that's not out of position. So you're not hunched at the shoulders, and you haven't got a big arch at the bottom of the back, the dotted curve. But the problem is, if you raise up the heel in a shoe, you push your knees forwards.
Yeah.
Yep, obviously. And so you either have to arch your shoulders back to balance, or more likely you have to crouch. Now, the good thing about children and good runners, when you practice, is when you land close to vertically aligned, you actually get a rebound off the ground. And they've measured this. Professor Dan Lieberman, I've actually pleasure to run with him. He measured 51% rebound effect. So he got measured 17%. I don't know how he measured it, but he measured 17% through the rolling of the foot. That's the foot lands slightly supinating on the outside of the foot, and then it rolls inwards as your hips come over the foot, and that builds up the pressure in the foot, in the plantar fascia and the arch of the foot, and that arch is like a spring. And that was about 17%, and the other 34% he measured came from the Achilles tendon and the calf muscle combination. So you're getting a free bounce off the ground. It doesn't feel like a bounce; it just feels like smooth running. But you actually get that free rebound. So the work you've done to take off, 50% of it is used again every landing. So with a shoe with a raised heel, you shorten the Achilles tendon and the calf muscle by about an inch, a few centimeters. It depends on so school shoes are generally built up at the back. So in the growing phase, children are shortening their Achilles tendon and their calf muscle. So there is no way that they can get maximum rebound off the ground. And the other thing is, in the shoe, all the muscles in your foot stop working. So you haven't got that aspect either. So you're losing the ability to rebound off the ground. And the only other way, there are only two ways of moving forwards. One is to leave the ground and fly over it, and the other is to walk along the ground. And so the people coming back to running, and they buy a shoe, they're told it has to be chunky and support. The support prevents the foot from working properly, and maybe even into the inside of the knee there. We find the medial, what's it called? Medial meniscus in the inside of the knee. And especially with orthotics, that tends to get damaged. But it's preventing good running, basically. So, and then people wear these chunky shoes, and they have a walking action, which means when they speed up, the foot lands in. Walking is fine if the foot tends to, you tend to push downwards when you're walking. If you walk casually, well, your foot must touch the ground in front of you if you're moving forwards. If you landed underneath you, you'd fall over forwards. So the foot must touch the ground in front of you. Yeah. But it's how much pressure is there on it. So if you stride out when you're walking, you're going to be putting a lot of pressure on the heel of the shoe. And in fact, on the outside, because your foot tips out the more you go forwards, and that's why shoes wear on the outside. So you're putting pressure against your direction of travel. Now, it's not so bad with walking, but when you start building up the speed and doing that and extending your stride length, you're hitting the ground harder and harder and harder. And of course, that's when you start going to get all the problems. Repetition of stress. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
So you'd mentioned earlier and about heel striking, that you were a classic heel striker.
Oh yes, yeah.
And I think even if, you know, I see reels on Instagram often that heel striking is, you either are or you aren't a heel striker. It's not a big deal or something you need to think about. But can you expand on how it prohibits good technique and you know, your foot's on the ground for longer, etc., as much as the force that it creates?
Yeah, well, it is factually correct. You are either a heel striker or you don't heel strike.
Yeah.
But I mean, the first illustration in our book makes a statement. We have an illustration with 3 landings, one on the heel, one on the midfoot, and one on the forefoot. And they're all overstrides. The foot is touching the ground too far in front with too much pressure. So the strike, as they call it, which is a good word if you're doing it badly, strike the ground, is not the issue. It's a result of what you're doing. It's not something you should try to achieve. So we get these people, silly people, so many of them running around on their forefoot. They've spent $200 on a pair of shoes and they're only using the front part. It's crazy. You know, they see maybe a top runner who's running at maybe 3 minutes a K or 250 or 240 even. They're running at that speed and their forefoot is touching the ground first. But their pressure is still downward, almost all downward, because they're moving so fast. And so you take an image and you have somebody touching the ground with the foot way in front of them. How much pressure there is on that depends on how fast they're going. If they're going really slowly, they're pressing on it hard. If they're going really far, it's just a brush, it's just a touch. So the foot touches and then the hips come forwards over the foot and land in a more or less downward action, and then they get a rebound. Whereas if you land on your toes, it's just a break, and the injuries that causes a peroneal tendonitis. You can sometimes get what they call a sublux cuboid, which is so there's a cuboid bone at the end of the first ray that can come out of place, and it's extremely painful. It's easy to manipulate it back in, if you very easy to do, but extremely painful. And there's peroneal tendons on the outside underneath the ankle bone. Achilles tendonitis, all the stressing, you're putting multiple times, not just your body weight. When you're moving, you're putting multiple times your body weight through the forefoot and the metatarsal heads in the shoe, in the foot. So forefoot running is just as bad as heel striking, and midfoot running as well. You're still placing your foot in front of you. What you need to do is just let your foot do its own thing. It will rise up off the ground and it will fall down again. And if your technique is good, it will be in exactly the right place. Yeah. So I think, and so a couple of things. One is, firstly, you emphasize in the book the importance of not trying to change how your foot strikes per se. And then secondly, how would, and this is touching on, I think it's your first rule, how would you suggest someone actually really thoroughly assesses for whether they're a heel striker or where they're actually landing on their feet? Well, as I say, that's not really important where they're landing on their feet, although if it is a heel strike, it will definitely be, they will be sitting back a little bit. We suggest you get it. Well, what we do is we suggest a video, but taken from the side, not from the front or the back. You really can't tell much from that. You might go to a medical professional, let's say, and in too much, and you probably are, but stopping that happening isn't the answer. What you really need to do is to fix your technique, and you will strengthen up and that will stop. That's because the leg the foot moving in too much, that overpronation is due to weakness and overstriding, sticking your leg out in front of you. And it supinates the opposite way more when you do that, so it pronates more. And because of the shoes and the way you're running, your glutes and your upper butt don't stop the knee rolling in as well. So it's really a strength issue. But if you film from the side and you take the point when your foot is fully landed, and if you draw a vertical line through the middle of your foot, that's through the arch on the top, just in front of the leg bone there. I can't remember the leg. What's it? The shin bone, just above, in front of the shin bone is the highest part. Draw a vertical line through that, and see how far your body, how much of your body is behind that line. And you want as little as possible. You really want that line to start going through the body, just in front of the center of the body. That would be perfect. But if your whole body, for instance, is behind that line, that when you finished your landing, you're sitting well back, so you're braking a lot, and your body is out of position, and therefore you're going to be running slowly, and you're going to be working hard for it. Is that
yeah, interesting. Yeah. So do you think is stride length a cause or an effect of faster running?
Oh, and both really. I suppose there are two ways of obviously the distance is the number of steps. If you're walking, the distance is the number of steps by the length of the step. So to go faster, you've got to increase one or the other, or maybe both. But people think you increase one or the other. So some people increase their cadence. They start doing 180 steps because top runners do that. But of course, top runners are running twice as fast. So, and the cadence varies. So that's really not a good course. So you increase the cadence, and that's limiting you because you're doing more bad steps. You're doing shorter ones, but you're doing more bad steps.
Yeah.
And if you want to be going faster, steps can you do per minute? Because if you do more steps, you're going to be shortening your stride length. So you're going to end up doing well over 200, and you're probably only going to be going, you probably won't even be reaching 5 minutes a K at that. And if you want to go faster, well, it's just impossible. So you end up being like an ever ready bunny, if you've ever seen the advert, so that's not really practical. I mean, you can move along the ground however you want, but that's not really a practical way for running. Now, what most people do, they extend their stride length. They stretch the leg out in front of them, which of course the foot lands in front, as we've said, it becomes a problem. That's where all the injuries occurred. What the good runners do is they get off the ground. As I was mentioning earlier, you get that free rebound off the ground. You don't have to work, you don't have to push off the ground. You can either push off your forefoot, which is what some very fit teenagers will do. They'll bound along, but tell you after 3K they're left behind me because they've run out of energy, or you can use good technique and build up the strength to get that rebound. So basically the stride length you can force it, which is what most people do, or you can learn good technique and it will come naturally, and your stride length will then be nothing to do with your leg length. It's all to do with how fast are you going and how high do you get off the ground. So I remember I measured and worked out the physics of it from my old schoolboy physics. I remember doing some reps, and at that time I was going pretty quick. I remember I did a 3:08 for the second last rep of 1K, and I did another one, 2:57. I was very pleased with that. And then when I got back, I checked the cadence. The cadence was 186, so I could work out the stride length. And the stride length was 180 for the 3:08. And for the 2:57, it works out at 181. So that 1 centimeter extra stride length, how did I get it? And I got it by taking off the ground just a millimeter or so more. So it was that little effort. All I had to do was get a little bit more off the ground, either because my muscles were more warmed up, or I put a little more effort into it, or maybe I stiffened my legs a little bit so I got a bit more spring. But I only had to get off speed to reduce my speed 11 seconds a kilometer faster.
Yeah. That's
So it's amazing how efficient you can be. All you have to do is to get off the ground, but you need to do it efficiently.
Yeah. There are gadgets that
Getting a good landing and building strength. I forgot where that question started now.
No, that's all right. I asked you about like is stride length the cause or effect of
Oh,
yeah. There are gadgets where you can measure the vertical oscillation more. Have you ever used those?
No, it's really doesn't matter, because there's good vertical oscillation and bad vertical oscillation. If you are running badly and you're sticking your leg well out in front, you're going to sink down. Your hips are going to drop. So presumably you're measuring your hips. Your hips are going to drop right down, and then you're going to push off, and so your hips are going to go way up. So you're going to have quite a big vertical oscillation.
Yeah, true.
Which is bad, and that's why the people do this, and then they want to reduce it. So what do? They try not to take off.
Yeah.
And you end up with a sort of a Monty Python style walking. You know, you're not leaving the ground, which is what you want to do. You're reaching forwards and placing your foot, and then you're trying not to let your hips go up. It's ridiculous. It's not a running action. But if you're running, you see top runners and they're in flight. If you look at them, their hips are way off the ground, and sprinters, their knees are way off the ground as well. I know we're going to come back to that, but they're not trying to do it. It's just a result of what's happening. So there are many things like that people try to do. They try to change their foot strike. They try to change their cadence. They try to change their vertical oscillation. There's all sorts of things they try to change, but these are all symptoms.
Yeah, there's the internet dropping out a little bit at times, Keith. Yeah. How did you just finish that last sentence?
I was saying that these things, vertical oscillation and number of steps, the cadence, the foot strike, all these things are symptoms of your technique. Yeah. Not things you should be working on. It's like the tail wagging the dog. It's really pointless. It's just going to lead you down a path that's going to get you nowhere.
So let's talk about knees now, because as we've sort of alluded to several times, that there's I guess one of the most logical things that you think you need to do to run faster is to just simply lift your knees.
Yeah.
More. So let's talk about that.
Well, the knees do come off the ground when you run well.
But you're not intentionally lifting.
Not intentionally. So if you just stand up and then you look at the height, say stand on both legs, and then you bend your right leg, for instance, and you measure the distance between your kneecap. It's probably going to be, I'm just going to do it while I'm talking to you. It's about 40 centimeters, I think, is the difference in the bend.
Right. You there?
A bit. Yep.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's all right. I don't know. Is it you or me that's...
Okay, so if you stand on both legs and then you lift up and you bend one leg, you'll see that your knee rises up a certain amount, probably 30 or 40 centimeters, quite a bit anyway. Now, so you know that when the knee bends, when the leg bends, the knee rises up. So that's one aspect of it. The other thing is we're trying to get high off the ground. So you might get 7 or 8, 9 centimeters off the ground if you're really running well. And sprinters will be high off the ground. So the combination of them being high off the ground and their leg bending means their knee is very high off the ground. But if you run along and lift your knees high off the ground, you're not going to go as fast as they're going. It's another symptom of running. It's a symptom of running well, that the knee rises high.
Yeah.
But simply just like increasing your cadence or changing your foot strike or any of those symptoms of running, it's not going to help. It's just going to make you, if you lift your knee up, you've got to put it down again. I think the leg is about 17% of the body weight or something like that. So you're unnecessarily lifting up
a lot of
20% of your body weight, only to put it down again. And when you put it down, you'll be putting it in front of you. You try lifting your knee up and not putting it down in front of you're putting your foot down in front of you. So it's a pointless exercise. It might make you go a little bit faster, possibly by restricting your overstriding, but it's a high energy method of doing it. Simply in the same way that if you're running and you start stretching your legs out in front of you, you will go faster, but it's a big price to pay on the energy. It's okay if you're in the last 100 meters of a 10K race, doesn't matter what you do, that's fine. You're not worried about energy, but if you do that all the way, you're not only stressing your body, but you're losing a lot of energy for nothing. It's like, driving a car with the brakes on. It's there's going to be a price to pay.
Yeah. So for people that might be starting running or that are slow, what advice, training technique area do you sort of work with them on, so that because with being slow, you run the risk of going into just a faster walking pattern.
Yeah.
So how can people overcome that so that they're running slow, but not walking?
Right. Well, we have to apologize because when you run well, you'll run faster. People say, I don't want to run fast. And we say, well, sorry, but it's going to happen. So really what we do, most of our readers are injured. And they're fed up and they really want to get rid of the injuries and stop getting them back again. And not all of them want to go faster, as I say, but a lot of them do want to go faster. So the first thing we have to do is change the brain. They need to recognize what they're doing and know what they should be doing. So the first 2 chapters of the book, for instance, just to publicize the book, the first 2 chapters, though, which can actually download for free from our website. The first chapter describes poor technique, and the second chapter describes the injuries that poor technique causes. So you can basically look up your injury and see how you got it. And it's basically all from overstriding. So that's the first thing, is to let people realize that. And then the second thing is obviously to fix the injury first. And Heidi then sets them on probably 6 weeks, if possible, of actually re-strengthening muscles that haven't been used for a long time, getting into a flat shoe, going barefoot when you can, and strengthening. So it has to be preparation. It's not an instant fix, but it's a lifelong fix. And then the next thing is to change the technique, for which basically we're getting people to start off feeling that rebound while stationary. It's only very short. I mean, you spend 10 minutes doing this, and we've got a starting off routine where you repeat every time you start until you don't need to do it anymore. You're getting yourself basically vertical. When you're standing still, you can land vertically aligned. You can land your feet underneath you when you're stationary. So we start off with that and getting people getting the rebound, and then we get them alternating the feet and feeling the same rebound. And you find if you're bouncing up and down, most people do it on their toes only. So we've got to make sure you're using the whole foot. But if you do that, it's quite a harsh landing when you're stationary, but it's just, it feels a bit odd, but it's a preparation. So we get people vertically aligned when they're stationary, and then we get them to gradually start moving. And the key here is most people will walk forwards, but we're trying to train people to actually get it's artificially introduced, but it's vital. It's a bounce and a tilt. So if you're bouncing on the spot and you tilt your body forwards, you'll start moving forwards. You'll start moving forwards because you don't want to fall over, and you have to take off a little bit stronger. So actually increases your stride length. So that's how you can increase your stride. So we actually get people doing a few exercises stationary and then moving gradually forwards and forgetting completely about speed. And we've got a few checks. They can check their technique when they start going. The typical one that works with everybody is doing looks crazy in the park, but you just do a 360 spin. Just spin 360 degrees while you're moving gently forwards and both directions, so you don't get dizzy, just a couple in each direction. And you'll find that if you're off balance, it's because you've thrown a leg forwards. Rather like an ice skater, bringing the arms in, they go faster. If they put one arm out, they would go off balance. And so that tells you that you're remaining close to vertically aligned. So that's what we're doing. We're setting people up in the right position at the beginning, and we're trying to get them to hold that position when they start moving. And then that's really vital to get people started off right, because if you start off wrong, it's going to be difficult to fix in your run. So we repeat that every time they start running. And then on the run, the whole of chapter 10, I think it is a whole load of tricks to try to get you back into balance and to refine your balance. And there are a whole load of them, because some work for some people and they don't work for others. And some don't work at the beginning, but they work later on in your running. So there's a whole range of them. But basically then people understand that they've repaired their injuries, they've got their strength, they understand what they're trying to do, and they've got techniques to start off correctly, and then they've got techniques to fix on the run. And then it really just comes down to experimentation, and basically the runners are on their own. Although we have a Facebook group, and we allow readers to post their videos, and people help them with their own experiences, and we chip in and say, well, look, this is really good, but you're just doing this a little bit. So what about this exercise now? And give that an experiment and see how it goes. So that's the procedure. First, fix the injuries. Second, make sure you're strong enough in the right places. Third, know what you're trying to achieve. And then we've got techniques for starting off and techniques for adjusting on the run. And the only thing apart from that is, once people get to a reasonable stage, I often get them to add some speed in deliberately with some speed work, things like what a simple one, like they're called wind sprints, which is getting out of wind, basically out of breath, which would be accelerating along, say, a football pitch, accelerating along the long side and then jogging across the rest, across the 50-meter side, and then speed, that sort of thing, to build a bit more fluidity and a bit more experience. Yeah, and that's basically it. So we're making the runners, giving the runners all the skills and the strength to work it out themselves, because everybody's different, but we're all going for the same common factor, which is trying to get that landing near vertical. And then you find that everybody looks the same after that. All the runners look the same. If they don't look the same, there's some continue to lift their feet a little bit or something, and you can see that. You can see it's not quite right, and you see what's happening. Usually that's because they've ingrained it, because they've been told to lift their feet and they've practiced it thousands and thousands of times. So that takes a little bit of getting out of their brain. Same thing with running on the toes. People who are toe runners, it takes quite a while to get rid of that and start using the whole foot. But yeah.
My son was told by his PE teacher to run on the balls of his foot, and fortunately he came home and said, and I said, no.
Yeah, I know. I think that's a reaction to people realizing it's heel striking, or it's a misinterpretation of high-speed photographs.
Yeah, that he told him, you'll go faster if you run basically on your toes. And Samuel said, no, I'm quite comfortable with what I'm doing, thanks. And my son's got an absolutely beautiful run.
Oh, excellent. Yeah. Good. We just need to keep repeating it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
That's it. That's what I'm doing at the moment. I mean, I'm getting faster again. I've done a lot of running over the last, training hard over the last 10 years or so, but what with getting married and houses and, and all sorts of stuff. But now that I'm retired, I'm really getting back into it. But I've been at least I had a year of getting little injuries. I had my veins done on my leg and it affected my blood flow and things, and getting little injuries and cuffs and things. But that's all gone now. But I had a whole year of training, and every race I'm getting faster now. But it's just a matter of building up the strength. You know, I know my technique's probably about as good as it's ever going to get.
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of doing the training now.
Yeah.
The training part is the easy part. It just takes time.
Mm.
That's what your son needs to do. He just needs to get out there and run, do
Yeah.
a few competitions maybe. Does he do any track racing?
Well, he just does school stuff. So
Yeah.
at the moment, yeah, and he does football, and football's, you know, really fascinating because there's so much forward running, backwards running, sideways running with Aussie rules. Like it's.
Oh yeah, they're good runners. They make good runners, and soccer players too make good runners. Yeah.
So let's maybe, if you want to give us maybe one or two key elements with running, as far as what we're looking for with the head, arms, legs, feet, and breathing.
Right. Well, all these are pretty natural when you get a good balanced landing.
Yeah.
I mean, but if the head's moving to the side, you're rocking from side to side. So every time you land, you're sinking on one side. Yeah. And your head is reacting to that. There's a action and reaction to everything.
Yeah.
So, so the head moving side to side would be a rocking side to side. Which means that almost invariably you are overstriding. Your foot's standing too far in front, and you're sinking down and sinking more on one side than the other because there's nothing to support that side, or less to support that side. If your head moves backwards and forwards, as you often see, even with people walking, that means your head is accelerating and decelerating, which is in response to your feet accelerating and decelerating. So when your foot lands well in front of you and it stops, your head will move forwards because it needs to have time to stop. You've got to use your muscles in your neck to stop it. And then when you take off again, you push forwards from the lower part of your body, your head goes back again. So that's the head movements. Shoulders, if your shoulders are rotating, it's because your heavy leg has been lifted or thrown forwards. So when you're running, if you want to experiment with that, just start throwing your legs forwards. One after the other, and you'll feel your shoulders rotating. Or another trick we've got in the book is for 5 or 6 strides, clasp your hands behind your back, and that will accentuate your shoulder rotation. And it will show you that your legs landing too far in front and you're bent at the waist. And now if you just straighten up your body, your upper body a bit, you'll find that your shoulder rocking reduces. So you get a better, more upright stance.
Yeah.
And of course, when you're running well, your shoulders hardly move. Your arms are just counterbalancing the leg movements. And because you're not reaching forwards, the legs largely balance what you're doing. Yeah. So that's the arm movements. What else are you thinking of?
With arms as well, where do you sort of have a general recommendation for people as far as close to the body and
yes, it basically works itself out. If your arms are tense and held up in front of you, then your legs are tense, and I guarantee you're doing little walk steps forwards. Yeah, arms tend to work themselves out, but it is something that sometimes people find it difficult to change. So the arms do affect the legs, and the legs affect the arms. So in the first edition of our book, I did have exercises for arms, but I actually scrapped that in the second and third editions. It's really not necessary. Once you're landing well, the arms will just relax, but we do have to sometimes help people relax. And the easiest thing is to drop your arms and your shoulders by your side while you're running, 5 or 6 strides, and then just pick up your hands. That's it. And yeah, that gives your arm about a right angle, which seems to be the most efficient position. So the arm is just rocking in the shoulder joint, just gently and relaxed. You don't want your arms, like your shoulders rotating, you don't want your arms to cross over your body, because that shows that that's responding to the leg being thrown forwards.
Yeah.
So But if that is happening, then well, the starting off routine we've got will basically sort that out. You know, unless you throw your leg forwards, you won't throw your arm forwards. It'll be relaxed. And in fact, when you're really good, you can actually just drop your arms by your side if you're not going too fast, up to about 4 minutes a K or so, 4:30 maybe. You can drop your arms by your side and you probably don't even need them if you're running really well, because everything's balanced. Yeah. So that's a good exercise though to try. One, holding your hands behind your back and seeing how much your shoulders are rotating, and then and dropping them down by the side and just picking up the hands. Yeah.
I think a lot of people fall into the trap too of carrying their phone in their hand or water bottle, and that. Yeah. Do you want to just talk about the imbalance of that?
Yeah, it's definitely quite a big imbalance. Even a water bottle. I hate running with something like that. Actually, on the Facebook or on our YouTube, I'm not sure, or both, there's a vlog. We did a vlog with our friend who did the videoing for us, a video man, and he was carrying, he's a good runner. I don't think he's got a 2:20 marathon, which is pretty hot, and he was carrying his camera on a tripod, on a pod, on an arm in front of him. Yeah. And it was really upsetting the movements because he's in balance. Yeah, it's awkward. Yeah. A phone isn't too bad, especially if you're running well, but if you're running badly, your arms are going to be moving a long way, so it's going to be even more of a twist, even more tension, you know? Yeah.
What about from a breathing perspective? Because I think I'm just thinking around sort of syncing your breathing or having a rhythm with your breathing to the cadence of your running, etc. Do you ever talk with people about their breathing when they change their running technique?
No.
Okay.
They just do it. They've been doing it for decades.
Yeah.
And you naturally adjust. I mean, people say you should breathe through your nose and out through your mouth. There might be some benefit of that, but you won't be able to get in enough oxygen, I would have thought. And I don't know any good runners who think about that. If you're going to think about it, and if there is some benefit, I would leave it until you're running well. And then that's a fine adjustment that you might want to make. But no, we do say in the book, though, that you will get out of breath more when you change your technique. People who have a walking action tend to use the skeleton to a greater degree than the muscles of a good runner. A good runner will be using their muscles to more effect, and that's why they get sore calf muscles at the beginning, and then you get sore glutes, and then you get sore back, and it's all your postural muscles building up and being used. But those muscles, especially when they're building, require more oxygen. So our runners, we tell them, don't get worried if you get out of breath in the initial stages. You'll get over that and you'll be a lot fitter, and you know, your blood pressure is going to drop and your heart rate's going to lower. It's all part of the process because you're starting to use the muscles a lot more. So yeah, there's that aspect of it. People will get out of breath for a while, and when I came back to running, yep, true. I mean, my heart rate went up. My maximum heart rate last year was 162, and now I've noticed I'm reaching 180 before I feel it. You know, don't worry about that 220 minus the age. Mine should be 154. Yeah, or 153 next month. So it's just an approximation, like BMI. That doesn't work for athletes because they've got too much muscle mass. So you'll find that your heart rate will drop after the training, and you'll be able to manage a higher heart rate anyway, but you'll be running a lot faster in the process. Well,
I definitely wish I had your book when I started 4 years ago, Keith, that's for sure. Do you want to just tell people a bit more about the book, what it's called, where people can find you on social media, etc.?
Yep. Okay. Well, on social media, just look up at Older Yet Faster, and you'll find us there. We have a Facebook group and a Facebook page, but mostly we use the group, and that's Facebook/Older Yet Faster, or that's easy. It's all Older Yet Faster, and the same on YouTube. Got a YouTube channel where when we do new videos, we put them up there. All of the book videos are actually on Vimeo, but you get to those through the website. So the best place to look is olderyetfaster.com. And there you can download the first 2 chapters of the book and the forward. You get a good idea of the writing and what we're thinking. And it also lists all the places we can get the book, which is basically anywhere. I think if you just go to Google and type Older Yet Faster, you'll find, but it's on Amazon. It should be in all good bookshops worldwide. Should be everywhere, we hope.
Yeah, and it's brilliant. I highly recommend it for people starting, or if you're 20 years into your journey and just want to refine your technique.
It's everything we've done. In fact, I was at a race, my first 10K for 10 years the other day. One of my clients from 5 years ago said, I read the book last week again, and I suddenly went faster again. So really, we're delighted with that. And that's what it's all about. We love that, when fixing people and helping them to run faster. Oh, the book's Older Yet Faster. Older Yet Faster. The Secret to Running Fast and Injury Free, or in French, The Secret to Running Fast and Without Injuries. So we've got a French edition now as well. So
right,
that's good. But yes, it's our lifelong work, really. It's 60, 70 years worth of experience, and thousands of Heidi's patients and thousands of my running technique, where I've tried all sorts of things and I've come down to what really works. And that's what we've put down in the book. And we've had about 5 different editors through the process, one for the first book, another one for the second edition. And we had about 2 or 3 in the third edition, effectively. A friend of ours and a woman in Canberra who does a lot of government work and scientific type work. So they've each put their own aspect on it. And we're now confident that there's nothing more we can add to the book, and there are no spelling mistakes. We're confident. We've been confident before, but now we're really confident. We had another friend who, after we'd completely finished the third edition after 2 years of refining it, and he said, would you like me to have a look? And he is a script writer. We said, yeah, sure, have a look. And he came up with about 250 changes.
Wow.
Just improving the text even more. Just little refinements.
Yeah.
Really, really good. So, yeah. So we think it's good.
It is great, and it's a well-refined read, that's for sure, and well worth taking the time to read it. So I highly commend it to people. Keith, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me. It's been a pleasure.